Hello, everyone, and welcome to 180 Degrees of Impact. I'm Matt Scott, and I am here with the one and only Jackie Biederman. Jackie, welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me.
How are you doing?
I'm good. How about you?
Good. It's good to hear from you and to have you as part of 180 Degrees of Impact. Of course, being part of it, I know about your Changemaker podcast, but I know that my introduction couldn't do you justice. So I would love if you could introduce yourself to me and the 180 Degrees of Impact audience and explain who you are and what you're all about.
I'd be happy to. So I'm Jackie Biederman, and I host Changemaker podcast. And it's for people that are looking to do something good in the world, that they're passionate about doing something. So it includes stories, business lessons, and ideas for growing and starting a social enterprise.
And hopefully we'll definitely hear more about that. I'm really curious, just more about your background, like what inspired the, not just Changemaker podcast, but what inspired you to enter this Changemaker realm?
Yeah. So a lot of different paths I feel like came together, but I've always had a fascination with entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship. And whenever I had the ability to speak with someone who was like a small business owner or started something, it was just like electric. Like it was this like feeling where you just get excited because they created something out of nothing. So that always has been like a pull for me. And I always wanted to like someday start something, like start a business, which is like this general idea that like there's no specifics. Anyway, I had been working in a corporate career and doing process improvement stuff. Like I would always gravitate toward how can you make what you do more efficient and better so you can help more people with whatever that is. And that's something that I was always drawn to, like I said. So then fast forward, I tried a variety of business ideas, and I was doing some consulting with a medical practice where with these process improvements, the physician or the practitioner was able to help more patients, which were children, and he was providing a great service to them. So it was just like a cool combination there. But during this time, I was, kind of had my hand in other things or just kind of looking around, and I came across social entrepreneurs. And prior to that, I hadn't heard that term before. I didn't really know what a social enterprise was. And so I started digging into that, and I looked at like Ashoka and, the other Skoll Foundation, Schwab Foundation, like big organizations that are doing really cool things to support these entrepreneurs. And I wanted to be a part of it. Like, how cool is it that not only with it, whether it's like a for-profit or a nonprofit, you have this business, you have employees, you're sufficient in that way, but you're also helping others. And there's this like whole model that you can build your business around helping others somehow. And I just thought that was so cool. But I didn't know anything about it. And I was thinking, how could I help I'd love to get involved with like the process aspects of things, but without having that knowledge, like I would just be some outsider that knows nothing. So I thought, how can I learn more about this and help people at the same time? And one of the best ways to improve what you're doing and get better is your lessons learned, to learn from somebody that's a few steps ahead of you. I mean, that's how most of us learn stuff. Either we go through it ourselves or we ask somebody who's been there. And so that's the whole idea behind this podcast, is talking to people that are a few steps ahead, and then people that are listening can learn from them. And maybe they can get inspired to do something themselves, or maybe they're already working on something and there's obstacles in their way that they no longer have to face, or they learned a new approach to it. So that's the idea. And then through this podcast, the big goal is that by learning from each other, we can all make a greater impact. So that's the long form story of how I got to starting this.
And I think I'm fascinated by your podcast. I don't think people would really be surprised to hear it because it closely aligns with 180 Degrees of Impact. It preceded 180 Degrees of Impact, where you're really helping people work through those lessons. And in a way, even more than what I'm doing with 180 Degrees of Impact, you're telling a story of like a specific issue or specific topic. Could you tell me a little bit more about just I'm curious, some of the people you've talked about, or some of the most compelling stories that you've told?
Yeah. Yes, there's so many. Let me, I wrote down a couple that I wanted to kind of pull out, but there are pilots that I created, which is what you've listened to, but the podcast itself, like from the feedback on the pilots, will be released in a couple weeks on July 27th. So in the first episode, which is kind of fun and exciting, I spoke with two social entrepreneurs that are both doing something with food. And one, Laura DeSaro, is a co-founder of Chirps. They use crickets and put them into chips. And crickets are super sustainable. For 1 pound of cricket meat, it takes 1 gallon of water to raise them. And for a pound of beef, it takes 2,000 gallons of water. So when she came up with these statistics and doing research, she was just like, wow, how can we get people to be more interested in eating insects? So that's one part of that show. And then I spoke with Jenny Costa. She's the founder of an organization called Rubies in the Rubble. And how she started is she was at like a farmer's market and saw all of this produce that was still good, but it was, getting close to the sell-by date. It would be too ripe soon. So it was all thrown away, like piles of it. And she put some on her bike. She went back home and she made her own jams and chutneys from like her family's recipes. And now she sells them, and she works with, she's working with Virgin to collect like their apples from their trains that people haven't eaten, and then converting that into like jams and chutneys. So she's working with other organizations and then selling her own products from something that would otherwise be thrown away. So those two have very different ideas, but like regarding food waste, which I thought was exciting. And for that episode, the theme of it is more than a mission, because often social entrepreneurs will kind of fall back on like, well, I'm doing something good. Like these chips are good for the environment, so you should buy them. Well, as a consumer, that's not enough. Like you need them to taste good. You need them to connect with you somehow with their brand. And so those are the things that we talked about in that show. But oh my gosh, there's so many people. There's Jared Yazzie. He's Navajo, and what he does is he brings awareness to Native American issues and struggles through t-shirt designs and clothing designs. So he's a designer, and he's run some fashion shows, and one of his t-shirts was included in a Smithsonian exhibit on Native American fashion, and it's Native Americans Discovered Columbus is the t-shirt that he created, which has been it's just like he's doing it to like I said, raise awareness and give something that people can kind of rally behind. I'm talking a lot, so you can cut me off. No. I've got a ton of stories in my head.
Yeah, I was going to say, I realize I'm sure you could go on for hours about all the stories, and the cool thing is that we're also fortunate to be able to listen to them, not just through the pilots, which you previously released, but also through the podcast coming out in a couple of weeks. But I think, well, first of all, before I get into ask my next question, I think it's awesome how you are able to really touch on these interesting topics. Like everybody loves food. I wouldn't necessarily be the first to think of eating crickets, but at the same time, it's something that we can all relate to. And I'm glad that you're able to present these things that we could all relate to in a way that is telling a story, like an educational lesson to learn from in a way. I'm curious, what are you learning through the process about innovation and making change? Like, are there any key takeaways that you're kind of gleaning from these interviews and conversations on the podcast?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like from every episode, every topic is something that I'm trying to apply myself, like with branding, considering that more and how that kind of plays in, and how you might think, again, that your idea is great, but you have to connect it somehow with people. And you're on one of the episodes that we talk about that, which is cool. Yeah, I think personally, one of the biggest lessons that I'm learning still is I'm in my head a lot. Like there's a lot of thoughts that I have of like I didn't go to journalism school. Like I don't have a lot of experience, like with doing podcast creation or with social entrepreneurship in general. And so that can kind of like, the more that you think about those things, the harder that it can be to get your idea out there. And so I think what has helped me is looking at like, yeah, it's not going to be perfect, and that's okay. This idea is something that I think is unique, and I want to give it a try. And so even though it might not meet that expectation or the goal that I have of like being one of the best podcasts out there, like it's just not going to meet that. That's okay. It's it's an idea that's worthwhile, that I think is worthwhile, and that I think could help some people. And so I think what's helped me is just reinforcing that idea and not trying to make something perfect. And when I talk to social entrepreneurs, that's something that keeps coming back up again. I mean, it's those first steps. They're early, they're ugly, but that's how you learn and that's how you get better. So that kind of gives me the confidence to keep going.
I think that's so powerful for me to hear, and I'm sure for other people to hear, because we are so nervous about putting out something that's not good enough or that people react negatively to. I mean, one thing that I see all the time, whether it's listening to podcasts or online on social media, is that you might have tons of people who have positive feedback for the work that you're doing, but even if you have like a few negative ones, that might just gnaw away at you, because that's your work, and that's your baby in a sense that you're creating, and it doesn't feel good to have someone taking kind of having negative feedback or critical, constructive feedback sometimes. So that's
right.
And I'm curious, how do you, beyond just finding value in your work on your own, how are you getting people on board and spreading the word about Changemaker podcast? So it's the number one podcast.
So that's a work in progress. I feel like I definitely need to do more to spread the word. So I'm not doing a great job of that right now. I'm focused more on doing the editing and getting the podcast created. But I'm planning on, I guess now that I'm saying it on video, I have to stick with this. This will be my accountability. But I'm planning on doing a few Facebook Live videos leading up to the launch, and just trying to share the idea behind it, share some lessons that I've learned and what people can expect before they hear the podcast. Just getting out there more and trying to step out of my introvert shell and talk a little bit more and share things on social media is the goal.
Awesome. And another thing that I'm sure is powerful about what you're doing is that there are so many people who will want to share and spread the word.
Yeah.
Especially the people like me, for instance, is one of the people who's included in this. And I'm really excited to see what you do with the podcast over time, because I mean, Do you know off the top of your head about how many people you've interviewed so far for the not just the podcast but the pilot as well?
Yeah. I wish I had the exact number, but it's like 25-ish.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a lot of people. So yeah, you're slowly building this change maker movement, and I'm excited. I'm actually after this going to listen to more of the pilots, and I'll stay tuned for the podcast when it comes out in a couple of weeks. But
Awesome.
it's exciting to see that you're building this thing, and I'm glad that I just happened to hear of it pretty randomly, not almost a year ago.
Yeah. I don't even know how you heard about it.
On social media through your outreach.
Oh, did you? Okay, so it worked a little bit. Awesome.
It always helps. That's another lesson that I've learned. I know I'm interviewing you, but I'll just say quickly.
No, please, yeah.
One lesson I've learned is that it doesn't hurt to keep reaching out, because you might not hear from 99% of the people or whatever that is, but like that 1% still matters. And I think that's something that I'm seeing through 108 Degrees of Impact, and I'm sure that you're seeing through.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, your support, Matt, means so much. It really does. So I appreciate it. I appreciate it. It just helps to kind of keep going, and it's good that you're finding value. So thank you.
I think the great news is that I know I'm not the only one finding. So it's exciting, and I can't wait, as I mentioned, to see it grow. I'm really curious, like taking a step back, even beyond what you've mentioned so far. What advice do you have for people who are not just trying to start a website or a podcast, but people who are like trying to start let's say a social venture or an impactful venture? What would you tell them if they came to you to ask?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people want to do things like that make a difference. And I think that's a huge pull with young people. I think people of all ages feel this pull, like you only live once. And what can you do in your life that has some purpose, even if it's not your full-time job? Like, how can you get involved? I think that can also be overwhelming. And I know personally for me, I probably have a bad habit of reading the news, maybe too much. I think it's good to stay informed, but I think it also can be negative. And you see lots of problems, which again, it's good to be aware of, but it can also be like, where do I fit in? And of course, on your own, you're not going to solve world hunger. You're not going to bring world peace, but you can do something. And I think that if you can find some area, my advice would be this, like if you can find something that you're interested in, maybe it's not even a passion yet, maybe it will be a passion someday, but something that you're interested in to give back somehow, or to do something that can help other people, my advice would just be to take that first step. So if you're interested in, we've been talking a lot about like food waste. Well, maybe your first step is a phone call to a food shelf. Or maybe your first step is you look on social media and you see somebody that's already involved with doing that thing. You can send them a direct message and just reach out and take that first step. And it might go nowhere. And take another first step, see where it goes. And then for you personally, maybe you'll find out that you were really interested in that, but maybe it's not something you are. And you'll learn something about yourself in the process, and you can kind of move along. I think real quick, another piece of advice that I've been learning as I interview people and then just personally is that whatever you're doing, it doesn't mean that you have to do that forever. So you can do something that you're passionate about, or discover your passions, or something that you're just interested in that can help other people. But it doesn't mean that that's necessarily what you're going to be doing forever. And that's okay. So I think just being okay with change and uncertainty, and being open to letting things go where they may, and just kind of taking it as it is, and not being set in, you have to get it right the first time. You have to find your passion now. You have to know exactly what you want to be now. It's always changing.
Yeah, I'm sure it always is changing and evolving. I think that's part of the excitement of it all.
Yeah.
But I think, considering that you said this might be a bad question, but I'm curious, like, what is your vision for what you want Changemaker Podcast to become and what you want to accomplish? I'm curious if you have any ideal guests in mind, or anything like that you have as stretch goals, let's say.
Yeah. Well, the stretch goal for this, like, it's a very like analytical goal, for this first season is to get 250,000 downloads. I want these stories to spread. Like, I want people to hear them. And that's like a big stretch goal that I have for myself, to get that many people to hear these stories and hopefully get inspired to start something or grow whatever they're doing now. As far as like big goals, like, this is fun. I mean, there's so many people out there and there's so many ideas, and I've only interviewed a handful of people, but there are so many. Like, I spoke with someone, I don't know, a few months ago, like just in conversation, and they were talking about how starting a social venture with like a family is difficult because you have those relationships that you need to maintain. Well, there's an episode there. I mean, there's people that are young and single, and they're at a different point in their lives, and starting a social enterprise might not be as challenging. Obviously, it's challenging, but people that are later on in their lives, they may have kids, they may have a spouse or a partner. How do you balance that? So there's just like, I'm uncovering so many ideas, and I write them down and make a note like, I want to come back to this. I want to come back to that. So yeah, I mean, like, there's just a lot of ways that this can go. And I'm excited. I don't have a specific person in mind, but I've got some topics in mind that I'm excited to interview people about and see how they handled it or what issues they ran into for those topics.
Wow, you've so much wisdom to share, and I think the cool thing about the format of what you're doing with the podcast is that you're able to use your perspective to weave it all together, whether that's through the newsletter, which I love, or whether that's through just the narrative that you tell as you edit all these stories together. So I'm really excited to see it all when it comes out. And you said July 27th?
July 27th. Yep. That's the launch date. And then every episode will be 2 weeks after that. So there's, so I can be consistent with that. But the trailer will come out a little bit earlier, so you'll hear that.
I'm excited to hear that, and I'll definitely share that. I do have one more question for you, and I think it's my favorite question.
Yeah.
So if you had a book or documentary about your life, written about you or made about you, what would the title of that book or documentary be, and why?
Yeah, that was a fun question for me to think about. I don't know how you'll feel about this answer because it sounds kind of lame, but it was relating back to kind of what we've been talking about. I guess the story of my life would be, I don't know, but that's okay. And what I mean by that, like I said, that title could maybe be using some work, but what it means is kind of like the uncertainty. Like, again, with anything that you choose in life, like it just kind of goes back to the thought that you need to have it all picked out, all figured out, or that if you have an idea, maybe it needs to be more finalized. And that's not the case. You don't know where things are going to go. You aren't quite sure what that path might be. I'm not sure what the next year will bring, and I'm excited to find out. And it's okay that I don't know that future. And I think for me, I am a project manager by trade. I didn't really mention that, but with the process stuff, like, so I am like deadline. I know the answer. Like, I know the end. We have a deadline. We have what we were going to deliver, and I'm finding in this space where it's an entrepreneurial space. You don't know everything. You don't know what you're going to run into. You don't know what path you're going to take. And that's okay. And so instead of looking at it in a fearful way, embracing it and being excited about like what that journey is going to be.
Wow. Thank you, Jackie. That was, that's really exciting. And I am definitely looking forward to one day buying that book or documentary on network TV. Who knows?
That'd be awesome.
As we wrap up, I'm curious, where are you on the internet? What are some links that people should check out to learn more about you and Changemaker Podcast?
Yeah. So changemakerpodcast.com. And that's my site. You can get the pilot episodes now. I'm going to pull them down and re-edit them. That's kind of like for the future soon. So you can check them out now. The trailer will be out there. And then on social media, Facebook, I'm on Facebook if you just search for Changemaker Podcast, and Twitter, it's Changemaker Pod, or Jackie Biederman. I'm out there on both.
Awesome. So you're all over the place. Yeah. I'm really excited to see the tweet that you put out there one day that says we hit 250,000.
I hope that happens. Yeah.
It'll happen. I'm sure it'll happen because you have the passion and the excitement to do it. And I'm happy to be part of that journey and part of the history of the Changemaker Podcast.
Well, thank you.
No, thank you. And as we wrap up, for anyone who's watching who wants to learn more about 180 Degrees of Impact, you could visit our website, www.lets.care, or on Twitter @LetsYouCare, or Facebook, facebook.com/LetsYouCare, or just search 180 Degrees of Impact. Until next time, first and foremost, thank you, Jackie, for joining.
Thank you.
And for anyone watching, please keep impacting.